Where is your energy? In the beginning, once upon a time, a boy met a girl. As the story goes, they fell in love, got married, or moved in together. After a certain amount of time, weeks, months, maybe even years, the first stage of love that I spoke about in my first podcast finishes, and things change. Many of the things that you found attractive in the first phase of love either disappear or are no longer something that you like. Those endearing, lovable, and possibly quirky things about the other person can suddenly appear annoying and frustrating. Your relationship normalizes, and both of you revert to your true personality type and using your own love languages. And this can be quite disconcerting. Where did the other person you loved go? What is wrong with the relationship? Welcome to Personalities, Parenting and Partners. It's the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. I'm Kate Mason. Today I'm going to introduce you to the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or the MBTI as it's known. It's all about personality types, and it works. I want you to start using these tools to successfully create the best connection and relationships with everyone in your life, starting with your partner. Over the next few episodes, we're going to look at the MBTI preferences and see how they affect you and your relationships. Types made up of 4 different sets of preferences. In this episode, we're going to focus on the first preference pair, extroversion and introversion. Extroversion and introversion describe the direction and focus of your personal energy. In simple terms, extroverts have a preference for and are energized by the outer world of people, activities, and events. Introverts have a preference for and are energized by the inner world of ideas, thoughts, and feelings. When looking at type, the most important thing to remember is that we can all use each one of the preferences, but one of each pair is our more preferred. I'm able to extrovert and introvert, but I gain my energy from the outer world of extroversion. Everyone spends some time extroverting and some time introverting. Now, don't confuse introversion with shyness. Being shy means that you get very nervous and self-conscious in social situations. This can happen to both introverts and extroverts. Not all natural-born extroverts run around chatting with strangers. I still don't like going into a room full of strangers, but because I'm an extrovert, the words just roll off the tip of my tongue. It's easier for me to engage in social banter than it is for Paul as an introvert. He likes to think before he speaks and doesn't want to make small talk with people he does not know. Take a minute to ask yourself which of the following descriptions seems more natural, effortless, and comfortable for you. So what does introversion look like? People who prefer introversion are usually energized by being alone or with 1 or 2 people they feel comfortable with. They're reflective and quiet, and they wait to be invited, whether it's into conversations or just life itself. They take time to reflect so that they have a clear idea of what they'll be doing when they decide to act. They're reserved and usually take time to get to know. They focus on a few things in depth and need privacy for concentration. Introverts communicate more easily by writing. They like texts and emails that give them time to reflect on the answer they would like to give. Introverts think, talk, think. They need to think about what they're saying. Expecting an instant verbal answer from an extrovert can be very stressful for them, as they need time to process their answer and give one that's not rushed and what is really what they want to say. They learn best by reading and reflection. It's not always about how an introvert acts in social situations, it's more about what they do to recharge. Introverts tend to feel drained after socializing and regain their energy by spending time alone. Of course, not all introverts are the same. Some introverts will need a short amount of time to recharge and can handle a fair amount of social time before feeling drained. Others drain quickly and prefer to spend very long periods of time alone. It's different for each person, and many introverts are somewhere in the middle. Because, let's face it, it's an extroverted world, and introverts need to extrovert to survive, so some of them get pretty good at it. Okay, let's talk about extroversion. We all know more than a few people who prefer extroverting. They're usually outgoing, expressive, and interested in the external events. They're energized by interaction. They like to make things happen, and generally feel at home in the external world. The extroverts' words are literally at the tip of their tongue, so they often speak before reflecting. Extroverts talk, think, talk. Words come easily. Because of this, they put their foot in their mouth often. In fact, both feet sometimes, as they go in to recover their initial mistake. How many times has this happened to you? Hands up. Extroverts often understand the problem better when they can talk it out loud. They can solve their problem as they talk. They're sociable and usually easy to get to know. They're often happy to disclose details about their personal lives to anyone who shows interest. I do this constantly, much to my husband's dismay. He cannot understand why I know so much about other extroverts and they me, when really I don't know them. We can spend 10 minutes with each other and come away friends for life, even if we'll never see each other again. He just shakes his head. Extroverts have many interests and they get their energy from active involvement in events and having lots of different activities. They need regular stimulation and variety, and they can get bored very easily. Extroverts learn best by doing or interacting, so don't keep them still for too long. They enjoy being around people and like to energize them. Once again, as with introverts, some extroverts do not require as much time in the extroverted world as others in order to be energized. Wow! So very different from the introverted's list. So how do you see yourself? Remembering that we can do both, but there is innately one preference you will choose that you prefer the most. Environmental factors also play an important role in our type, because the way we're raised and the circumstances of our lives depend on whether we use our preferred type or our non-preferred. For example, I was brought up in a household where all other 5 members were introverts. We also lived in the country, so for the first 18 years of my life, I had a very small group of friends. I sat inside and read many books, as I had 2 librarian parents. I didn't go outside and seek any friends, as there weren't many people to be found. I spent much of my childhood bored and lonely. Going into the city for university was a game changer for me. I unwittingly found my path and my preference. My world opened. So many friends to see, places to be, fun to be had. I don't think I've read many books or spent many days home alone since. Let's look at the 2 different preferences in a relationship. So what often happens when an extrovert and an introvert meet? It can seem like a perfect combination. Yin and yang, so to speak. Puzzle pieces that fill in the gaps. What a great personality match. How wonderful for the extrovert to have someone to listen to their stories and not interrupt. And for the introvert to have someone to hold the conversation when they're out together and cover all of those awkward moments when conversation's needed and they are unprepared. They both fill in missing parts of their individual personalities. The extrovert energizes the introvert. The introvert gives important downtime for the extrovert. The introvert shares their outlook on life in a deep, meaningful conversation. The extrovert shares their outlook on life with all their thoughts and ideas brought to the table, whether deep or superficial, in a brain dump of verbal information. Paul and I started our relationship with no understanding around different personalities or type. We just both thought that we were right. I'm the extrovert and he's the introvert. Initially in our relationship we went out all the time, saw lots of people, and we both worked with people every day. So much fun, I thought. As time went on and phase 1 disappeared, as I've previously mentioned, I would plan a full, exciting social weekend of friends and fun. But we would have so many disagreements about how our weekend would run that we would usually only end up going to one event out of the 3. Little did I realise, until we found out about different personalities, was that I was overwhelming Paul with my need and love of socialising in the outer world. And he was so energy depleted, without the downtime that he needed, that we were in a state of constant friction. This friction lasted for many years, in fact until we finally discovered that we were so different. It was the breaking of us, but discovering how different we were was the making of us, as it created the path for change. We learnt how to readjust our ways of understanding each other and understand our differences. Think about the relationships you're in now. Is this an issue for you? Listen, I'm one. I love being one. I know lots and lots of people who are. I'm an extrovert. What about you? I'm going to introduce you to my daughter Cass, and together we're going to explore the yin and yang, as I mentioned earlier. What happens when an extrovert meets and falls in love with an introvert? Hi Cass, welcome to Personalities, Parenting and Partners. Now tell me, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I am definitely an extrovert.
Perfect. So we'll have lots to talk about. In fact, we might not have enough time given that we've got plenty to say. Today we're talking about extroverts and introverts as partners. Now I've always been attracted to an introvert as a partner and you have as well. But why? What's the attraction? We're here to discuss why and what it is that attracts us to them. So, Cass, what's your number one reason for being attracted to an introvert?
I think my number one reason would have to be the fact that being an extrovert, they are quieter than me. They appear to listen, and at first, often they are quite mysterious, and I like to get to know them and work out what makes them tick, and they are sort of a challenge to me from the beginning, but are wonderful people, yeah.
Yep, that's excellent. So when you say appear to listen, does that mean that they don't always listen to us?
Guess we'll never know, will we? Nah, not always, but they do. They do listen.
And I mean, I have run a lot of workshops, and introverts do often mention that when they are listening to an extrovert, they do switch off sometimes. So sometimes they might not always be listening. So let's discuss some other things about why we are attracted to introverts. So what other things come to mind for you?
Well, I guess they don't take over the conversation like we do. Like if we often are at a party or something like that, they might sit back and let us dictate the conversation, which means that we don't butt heads, I suppose.
Yes.
They think deeply about what we say. We operate well together in a sort of opposites attract sort of way. Mm-hmm. They don't steal our thunder.
So when we're out there and we're performing as we do, often as extroverts, they sit there pretty quietly, don't they? They're actually very good foil for us socially. Very good. They
often, have good senses of humour that you don't know maybe until you break through that initial hard case at the start. Mm-hmm. They can often come out with some fascinating stuff that we might never have thought about before.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do talk. It depends on the type of person, but they can talk a lot when they're comfortable with people that they're with in a party situation, if they're with their friends or
when they're alone with us, they don't stop talking. I mean, people often think that introverts don't talk much, but when an introvert is actually very comfortable with who they're with, then sometimes they're really quite extroverted and it's very hard to shut them down in a way, which we don't, of course, want to do. We love listening to introverts. We try to very hard. So they're usually fairly quiet at the right moments, aren't they? Which really, when you're in an introvert-extrovert relationship, the right moment's usually all the time for the extrovert, if they'd like that. Mm-hmm. So what else about them?
They keep their thoughts to themselves, which sometimes that can be good and bad, but I guess, good in this sense. They laugh at our jokes most of the time.
Well, we train them up anyway. They're very good at that.
They definitely think that we're very different to them, but and they're a haven to come home to at the end of the busy day. Often they, because they are quiet and they're not going to overstep the conversation, and they'll let you talk, I suppose.
Yes, and just get rid of the extrovertedness that we have, to be able to let them know about everything that we've done throughout our day before they even get a chance to open their mouths quite often. So for us, they're all the wonderful things that we really love about introverts. And, sadly, this is going to be a little bit of a bias here because we don't have an introvert to tell us all the lovely things about us. However, we're also going to discuss that really sometimes it's just not all milk and honey, is it? So, Cass, what ticks you off or sometimes stresses you out about having an introvert as a partner?
I think my biggest one would be that sometimes the quietness can be too quiet, I suppose. We don't know what they're actually thinking, which can be really stressful. And I'm often trying to, I guess, stare at them and work out what's actually going on in their head. So that can be stressful.
Yes,
because
very much.
As an extrovert, I guess I tell you exactly what I'm thinking, and it's you know what I'm thinking, and whereas they're much more internal in that sense. They can bring up issues that I might already think have been resolved. So, like a week or a year down the track, sometimes, that's obviously the other end of the spectrum, but they might bring up something that I thought we had already resolved, but they've kept thinking about it and blown it up in their minds. So
Absolutely.
really
and
tough.
I find that very often that I might be sitting there and all of a sudden from the side comes, well, the other week when you did so-and-so, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, didn't we resolve that? Where has this come from? And because introverts think and sometimes can overthink things and they don't verbalize it at the time, then often for an extrovert it's like, bam, we don't know where that's come from or what's happening, and we have to take our heads back to weeks before.
And fight back to the same situation.
Yes.
Try and fight the same fight that we've already fought, which is really frustrating.
Absolutely, because they've been sitting in it and not verbalising their feelings about it.
It's quite stressful
yes.
as well. I guess sometimes in social situations they might not want to go out multiple times a weekend, or they like to be at home in their own space, which is fine because I quite like having my own time too, but I do, when I'm in a group of people that I love being with, I do like to stick around for a long time, or I like to have that continuous energy from seeing people, whereas they are kind of like, no, let's go home sort of thing, which usually is fine if you compromise if they've come out with you and that's a stretch, then it's a good compromise. But that can also just be a big difference as well.
And sometimes when they say, oh, all I want to do is stay home today, and my heart just starts sinking. Boring. And I think, what am I going to do? So it is fortunate that Cassie and I are both extroverts in the same family, so we are able to get out and get about the place if we really need to. But another thing that my husband often does before we go out is ask me what time we'll be home.
Yeah.
And I've got no idea what time we'll be home, but he needs to put some time around it, a time frame around it, so that he can have an idea in his head when the social occasion might end, which is really important.
After dessert.
So tell me something else. What other things?
I guess quite often they're selective on their friendships, which once again, I'm okay with because I'm fairly selective as well, I suppose.
Cass is quite a different extrovert to me. I tend to go out and take on everybody I know or meet as a friend. My husband often sends me out the door to run a workshop and says, could you make some money today? Don't bring home any more friends, because I just love people. So I'm not very selective about my friendships. I'm friends with everybody. However, my husband has one very best friend that he loves and a very small circle of other friends, and he can't believe how many friends extroverts make and have. So sometimes he doesn't think it has much depth to it. But I do have this conversation with him and say, I really care about everybody that I do come into contact with and create a friendship. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think I'm a bit like because I'm quite selective. But when I'm with those friends that I'm selective about, I can be there for hours and spend all the time in the world with them, and they bring me that energy when I leave. Like I leave much more energized and wanting to keep going and do more things and see more people.
Yes.
So I'm not exhausted by the social occasion, but I am more picky.
Yes,
with
about
who I
your
hang out
friendships.
with, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's the other thing for us is that the need to understand that when you have an introvert as a partner, that when they have too many friends around or they go out for too long or there's too many occasions planned for them, that they really honestly find it exhausting. And that's something that stresses us about them. But if we understand, and as we say, we're looking at how to understand the other preference, then we can make rules and conditions and put in place things that can stop the exhaustion from them and keep us happy as well.
Yeah.
So now we've looked at pros and cons. Let's roll up our sleeves and look at how the two of us, the introvert and the extrovert, can exist in harmony. So how do we make that work? So, Cass, what do you do to adapt to introvert preferences in your relationship?
I think it's just all about compromise, really. When it comes to, I guess, like the example we used before, when it comes to going out, I guess the compromise on their behalf is actually coming out and hanging out with maybe our mutual friends or my friends. And then I'll say, okay, well, we can just stay until you can come and say, it's time to go, and I'll happily go. Because that's when you've had enough, or like just the fact that you've come there is compromise on my behalf. Or even, I guess, when there is a situation that you need to talk about, or a problem that you want to be solved, just kind of taking the right moment to approach it, not in a busy, like in a quiet place in your own home, and I guess stepping it out of what you're feeling and thinking and how that makes you feel, and give them time to process it and give you the right response.
Yeah. So when you're resolving a conflict, it's quite important to allow the introvert time to think about what answers they need to give and would like to give, and rather than the extrovert, as extroverts do, it's something called a brain dump. So usually the extrovert will talk about everything that's in their head, not only the problem that's at hand. So it's really important too, when you are talking to an introvert, to be able to hone in on what actually is the problem that you need to discuss, so that they can concentrate on that. Because we're remembering, as I spoke about before, that introverts think, and extroverts talk, think, talk. So you've got two really different combinations of conversation. So understanding how each other's conversation works is really, really important. The other thing about conflict is sometimes for an introvert, resolving conflict, they can write. If they can write, email or text, sometimes they're able to put all of their thoughts down via that medium. And for them, it helps start the conversation rather than a verbal start to a conversation if they're having an argument or some form of conflict as well. Do you find that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what are your primary needs as an extrovert in your relationship?
I think attention in all ways is a primary need of mine. I just need a little bit of affection and attention, physical touch, and then I'm happy, if he needs space or, wants to be by himself, I'm happy to let him have that. I just would rather him, give me a little bit of affection before he goes off and does his own thing, just to make me feel loved and that. So, I think you can definitely make it work, but you need to understand what makes the other person tick and then find that compromise around it. Because it's certainly not easy sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing about relationships is, as you really all understand out there, is that relationships are a constant work of art. You need to work on them all the time. There's not one day where something is not necessarily misconstrued or someone's perception is totally different about what's happening. And if you work on it every day and you do have a really great understanding around each other, then you are able to communicate much better than you would be if you don't have the tools that we're talking about utilizing in your relationship. So to keep you happy, a certain amount of attention and time is given, and then you're happy to move on. That's fulfilled. And for your partner, you find out what keeps them happy as well. So do they like 3 or 4 hours alone? Do they like just a short amount of time, just to give them their space so that they're re-energized when you get back together? So what do you discuss that will help how do you discuss with your partner what will keep them happy? What kind of things do you talk about, or how do you have that conversation usually?
I guess just in the same way that I said before, like just getting them at the right time and saying like, look, I need these things. And, and writing down 5 things that we both need to keep us happy, and then trying, I guess, to stick to those things. Often
that's a great idea.
Go up and down in terms of sticking to it, but and then that way we know the core of what's important to us, to each other, and try and do that. But yeah, it can be hard sometimes too. But I guess if you have that as a base, then yeah.
And understandably, it's hard for us, and it's also hard for the introvert dealing with the extrovert. It must kind of be like having a puppy in your house all the time, often that needs attention, needs looking at, needs listening to. So
Definitely.
We do understand, that this is not a bias against introverts at all, but this is how the extroverts perceive and see the introvert, and more importantly, the need for you to understand each other and understand and talk about it. And that's why we're going through the preferences of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. So thank you, Cass. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and also all of the valuable learnings that you make as life goes along, because things change all the time.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Thank you, Cass.
Thank you.
So how many of you listening can relate to this? Remembering that we all have very different perceptions. Here are some of the resolutions from today that you might want to take away and use. Number 1, understand each other's personalities and how they work. 2, look at the world through their eyes and realize you're different, not right or wrong. Keep the right kind of conversations going, some verbal, some written, so that both types have their communication needs met. Do this in a quiet, safe place where you both have the freedom to talk or be silent. Warn each other about any topic that might be controversial so you can both get a handle on your own answers. The extrovert won't just then say everything that's on the tip of their tongue, and the introvert will have time to craft their conversation to say exactly what they mean without being rushed. This is not a time to brain dump or keep information inside your head. Remember the reasons why you love this person and cherish them. After all, the treasures that brought you together are more important than those things that drive you apart. Learn to love them and accept them. That's why if you're an extrovert, you should learn about what introverts want you to know about them, and vice versa. You'll find it easier to communicate and maintain relationships, and you'll also see that these 2 types can get along really well. Here are 3 takeaways I'd love you to remember. Maybe jot them down. Number 1, find your needs for social stimulation with other friends if you're an extrovert. Discuss how much downtime your partner needs and give it to them. Always discuss your needs and theirs, and ensure that both of you are aware of the other person and willing to adapt your preferences to ensure that happiness is not just a one-way street. Now here's the best part. This is not just a once-in-a-lifetime discussion. This is ongoing. And here's a thought. You might need to write a text or an email to prepare your introverted partner for subject matters, but giving them warning helps them to prepare what they need to say. So, just do it. Thank you for listening to Personalities, Parenting and Partners. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review that would help others to learn about this podcast. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Podcasts That Pop. Would you do us a favour and recommend this podcast to just one friend? Thanks, and we'll see you next time.